Imagine walking into a crowded room where everyone is wearing a mask. Some of those masks are smiling, others are frowning, but behind them, nobody shows their true face. Now, picture stepping into that world with no mask of your own, no deception, no hidden agenda, no desire to manipulate anyone. How long do you think you'd last? How fast would people dismiss you as naive, foolish, or even weak? That's exactly the tragic situation Prince Myshkin faces in The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Myshkin is a man with a pure heart, unwavering honesty, and limitless compassion. But instead of being celebrated for these qualities, he's mocked, used, and ultimately broken by a society that simply cannot handle his goodness. And here's the thing, this isn't just some dusty story from 19th century Russia. It's a brutally honest mirror reflecting a truth about human nature that's still painfully relevant today. So let's really think about it. Why do good people so often find themselves at a disadvantage? Why does sincerity so often invite ridicule instead of respect? And the biggest question of all, if being good only leads to suffering, is it still worth it? By the time we're done here, I promise you'll see kindness, morality, and the hidden risks of being too good in a brand new light. And there's one final jaw-dropping insight I'll share at the end, one that just might change the way you see not only the world, but yourself. So, let's start by asking, why is goodness so often misunderstood as foolishness? To answer that, we need to look hard at what society actually values. We love to say we admire honesty, kindness, and integrity, but do we really? Or do we just tolerate these traits when they don't get in the way of our own goals? If you look at history, the people who climb to the top usually aren't the purely good ones. They're the ones who know how to work the system, to play the game, to read human nature and act strategically. They know when to be ruthless, when to be charming, and how to hide their true motives behind a carefully crafted mask. Niccolo Machiavelli in The Prince argued that a ruler has to be willing to act immorally if needed, because the world doesn't reward goodness, it rewards results. And that's exactly why Prince Myshkin's fate is so tragic. He either doesn't understand or flat out refuses to accept the rules of the world he lives in. He can't manipulate or lie, and honestly, he doesn't even want to. That's why people see him as an idiot, not because he's unintelligent, but because his pure-heartedness makes him painfully vulnerable in a world built on self-interest and competition. Now think about this in our world. How often do you see genuinely kind, honest people getting stepped on? How many times do you hear stories of big-hearted people being betrayed by someone they trusted? And let's be real, how many times have you felt foolish for believing the best in someone only to get burned? It's not that the world is all evil, but there's no denying that a certain amount of cunning is usually necessary just to survive. Even those who think of themselves as good sometimes have to bend their values to protect themselves. And yet, despite all of that, we still dream about people like Prince Myshkin, people who are truly unshakably good. But here's where Dostoyevsky flips the script. Myshkin isn't just a passive martyr. He doesn't simply suffer. His goodness actually challenges everyone around him in a way they don't even fully understand. His kindness is like a mirror, forcing people to confront their own flaws. That's why people feel so uneasy around him. He never judges them directly, but his very existence exposes their hypocrisy. His sincerity highlights their lies. His compassion makes their selfishness impossible to ignore. So rather than celebrating him, they push him away. And that raises the most uncomfortable question of all. Is Prince Myshkin really the fool? Or is it the world around him that has completely lost its way? let's dig deeper into this paradox, because there's a lot more to unpack. Why does real goodness make people so uncomfortable? The answer is rooted in how people relate to each other every single day. Whether we're talking about personal friendships or entire societies, human relationships are built on subtle power dynamics. Even in the most casual conversation, there's a silent negotiation happening. People measure their words, calculate their tone, and adapt their behavior based on what they expect in return. We live in a world of quiet manipulation, where even acts of kindness are often traded for something down the line: gratitude, a favor, or some social credit. Prince Myshkin doesn't do any of that. He gives without expecting anything back. He speaks with total honesty, no matter how awkward or inconvenient. He forgives without keeping score, even after being hurt over and over again. In a world where everyone wears a mask, he shows his face, raw, unguarded, and real. And that's exactly why people don't trust him. Psychologists have a term for this: cognitive dissonance. It's that uncomfortable, anxious tension we feel when someone or something forces us to confront truths that don't match what we believe about ourselves. When Myshkin interacts with people, he triggers that discomfort. They might say they value honesty and kindness, but faced with someone who lives those values completely, they feel threatened and exposed. It reminds them just how far they've drifted from their own ideals. And instead of accepting that painful realization, they reject him. Think about how this plays out in real life. When we hear about someone who sacrifices everything to help others, we might admire them, but deep down, we can also feel uncomfortable. We tell ourselves they're different, that their kind of selflessness is unrealistic or even impractical. Sometimes we even look for flaws in them, trying to prove they're not really that good. Why? Because if we admit they truly are that good, we'd have to question our own choices, our own compromises, our own excuses. That's exactly what happens to Myshkin. He becomes a symbol of something unreachable, a kind of moral perfection that people claim to admire but actually resent. His presence alone disturbs the social order, not because he tries to, but just because he exists. Dostoyevsky uses Myshkin to show us something profound about human nature. We say we want perfect goodness in our lives, but when faced with it, we often find it suffocating. Pure goodness, the kind with no calculation or hidden motives, is actually hard to accept. Most people have no idea what to do with it. So instead of raising it up, society often pushes it away. But does that mean being good is a mistake? Is goodness meaningless in a world that punishes it? That's where things get really complicated. Despite all the suffering Myshkin goes through, he never regrets his kindness. He doesn't become bitter or wish he'd been more cynical. He stays true to who he is. And in that, Dostoyevsky gives us an incredible insight. The value of goodness doesn't depend on how the world sees it. It doesn't need applause or rewards. Goodness is valuable simply because it is good. But that raises another brutal question. If goodness is so pure and powerful, then why does it so often lead to suffering? Why do the best people seem to get the hardest lives? That question sits right at the heart of The Idiot. Prince Myshkin tries so hard to bring love and understanding to the people around him, and what happens? He gets torn apart by cruelty, mocked for his innocence, and ultimately destroyed by a society that doesn't know what to do with him. But Dostoyevsky doesn't treat this as a random tragedy. He pushes us to look deeper at the link between goodness and suffering. Throughout history, think of people like Jesus, Socrates, Gandhi.
Martin Luther King Jr., they all dedicated their lives to truth, justice, and compassion, and they all faced hatred, persecution, and violence. So why does the world resist goodness instead of embracing it? One reason is that true goodness is disruptive. It shakes things up. It challenges people to look hard at their own moral contradictions. And let's face it, most of us don't want that. We want to keep living the way we always have, without having to question ourselves too much.
When Prince Myshkin steps into Russian high society, he completely disrupts its structure. The people around him are used to living in a world of hidden motives, careful alliances, and endless maneuvering for power and status. That's the normal social fabric. And then here comes Myshkin, a person who refuses to play the game, refuses to manipulate, refuses to hide. He becomes an anomaly. And what happens to anomalies? Usually, they either get forced to conform or get pushed out completely. Myshkin, because he won't change who he is, ends up being rejected. So here's the hard question. If being good leads to suffering, what's the point? Is it even worth trying to be good? Dostoyevsky doesn't hand us an easy answer. He doesn't say that kindness will eventually win or that good people will always be rewarded. Instead, he gives us a much deeper and honestly more uncomfortable truth. The value of goodness has nothing to do with how other people react to it. Being good isn't about results. It's not about getting praise or winning some moral trophy. It's not about success, recognition, or admiration. Goodness, in its purest form, exists for its own sake. It is worth living even if the world never appreciates it. That's a radical idea, and it's hard to swallow. Everything in our lives teaches us to measure our worth by results. We want our goodness to be validated. We want our sacrifices to pay off. We want things to feel fair. But true goodness doesn't work that way. It isn't transactional. It doesn't keep score. It doesn't ask, "What's in it for me?" Still, there's a brutal paradox. If goodness is so valuable, but it doesn't change the world around it, what power does it really have? If it doesn't protect us from pain, doesn't make us more successful, doesn't even guarantee respect, why does it matter at all? That's the question Dostoyevsky wants us to wrestle with. Because although Myshkin suffers, he also leaves an undeniable impact on the people around him. Even those who betray him can't forget him. Even those who laugh at him are changed by him.
It shows us that while goodness might not win in a traditional sense, it has a power that goes far beyond success or influence. It's a quiet power, one that works almost invisibly under the surface. So what exactly is that power? How does true goodness shape the world in ways we might not see right away? Let's break it down. Throughout The Idiot, Myshkin never tries to fix people. He doesn't preach. He doesn't force his values onto others. He doesn't push them to be better. He just is honest, kind, forgiving, and compassionate. And in simply existing that way, he holds up a mirror. That mirror forces people to see themselves more clearly. Their own lies, their hypocrisy, their self-serving choices, everything becomes visible in his presence. Some people respond to that by trying to change. Others get so uncomfortable that they attack him or push him away. But no one can pretend he never existed. That's the quiet, hidden power of true goodness. It reveals the truth. It doesn't control, doesn't manipulate, doesn't demand. It just exists.
and forces people to confront who they really are. Think about it. In your own life, have you ever met someone whose kindness was so genuine, so unselfish, that it made you stop and rethink how you treat people? Maybe it was a friend who forgave you without conditions. Maybe it was a stranger who helped you with no expectation of thanks. Moments like that stick with you, don't they? They challenge you, even if you don't want to admit it.
That's why, even though society might call people like Myshkin idiots, in reality, they're some of the most powerful forces in human life. They change the world, not through violence or persuasion, but through their simple existence. And that power comes with a cost. Dostoyevsky understood that. People who live with complete honesty and unconditional goodness will often suffer. They'll be taken advantage of. They'll feel out of place. They'll get betrayed, mocked, and hurt. And yet, they refuse to become someone else. That's the tragedy and the triumph of Prince Myshkin. He is broken by the cruelty of the world around him, yes, but he never stops being himself. He stays true to his ideals in a world that tries to beat them out of him. So in the end, does that make him a fool? Or is he actually the only one who truly sees the world for what it is? Dostoyevsky doesn't give us a neat, easy answer. And honestly, there is no neat answer. It's a question every person has to answer for themselves. Is it better to protect yourself, to learn how to play the game, to wear a mask like everyone else? Or is it better to stay true to your values, even if it costs you everything? Most of us will face that choice at some point, whether we realize it or not. And it's never black and white. It's complicated. It's painful. But maybe, just maybe, the true measure of a life isn't in what you gain, but in how much light you bring into the world, even if that light is small, even if nobody notices. And that leads to a final, powerful revelation. Goodness is not about rewards. It's not about winning. It's not about making sure you never suffer. Goodness matters because it is right. Period. In the end, whether people call you a fool or a saint, whether you're celebrated or forgotten, whether your kindness is returned or rejected, what matters is that you stayed true to yourself. Because in a world built on deception and self-interest, choosing to be good anyway is the most powerful choice you can make.
But here's the thing. There's one last question left, and it's the hardest of all. If goodness is so important, then why does the world keep trying to crush it? To really answer that, we have to look deeper at how goodness actually influences human behavior and what kind of legacy it leaves behind, even when the world seems to reject it.
Let's dig into that last question. If goodness is so important, if it's so powerful, then why does the world seem to crush it time and time again? Part of the answer is that real goodness is a threat to the way society usually operates. Think about it. Most human relationships, most institutions, and even entire cultures are built on systems of negotiation, compromise, and power games. Even kindness, most of the time, comes with expectations. We give to others partly because we hope they'll give back, or at least acknowledge us. But someone like Prince Myshkin, who gives freely, loves unconditionally, and refuses to play those hidden games, throws the entire system off balance. He is unpredictable, impossible to categorize, and impossible to manipulate. And when society can't categorize you or control you, it usually rejects you. That's why Dostoyevsky shows us that true goodness is not just ignored, it's actively resisted. Because if someone like Myshkin is allowed to exist and thrive, it forces everyone else to question their own choices,
their own moral shortcuts, their half-hearted compromises. That's uncomfortable, and most people would rather avoid that kind of self-examination. It's the same reason we sometimes feel a weird sense of relief when a good person makes a mistake. It reassures us that they're just like us, flawed, human, messy. But when someone seems to live a life of absolute moral courage, we feel challenged. Their existence alone shines a light on all the ways we might be falling short. And that, right there, is the hidden power of goodness. Even when it's ridiculed, rejected, or destroyed, it still changes people. It stays in their minds. It nags at them. It plants seeds that might grow much later. That's why even though Myshkin is crushed by the society around him, he is never truly defeated. Think about your own life. You might forget thousands of faces you meet, but you remember the people who showed you real kindness, who helped you without expecting anything back, who forgave you without resentment. That memory lingers. It challenges you. It might even inspire you, quietly, years down the line. That's what Dostoyevsky is telling us. The impact of true goodness is subtle. It's slow. It doesn't look dramatic like a revolution, but it changes hearts, sometimes invisibly, sometimes painfully, but always powerfully.
So what does that mean for us? Should we just accept suffering if we want to be good? Should we throw ourselves to the wolves expecting nothing? That's not really Dostoyevsky's point. He isn't saying that being good means letting yourself be endlessly abused. He's showing us that if you choose to be good, you have to be willing to pay the price. And that price is real. You may be mocked, you may be rejected, you may feel completely alone. But in choosing goodness anyway, you live a life of radical honesty. You live without a mask. And even if the world doesn't appreciate it, you will have stayed true to who you are. That might sound small, but in a society that is constantly trying to twist you into something else, staying true to yourself is actually one of the most courageous things you can do. So yes, the world often tries to crush goodness, but it never fully succeeds. Why? Because goodness plants seeds. It leaves traces. It wakes something up in other people. Even if they resist it, even if they hate it, even if they run away from it, they can't forget it. And that is the final, deepest insight Dostoyevsky gives us. Goodness is not about success. It's about truth. It is about living in a way that reflects what is most human, most compassionate, and most honest, regardless of the world's rewards or punishments. So let's bring it back to you. Maybe you felt like Myshkin before. Maybe you felt foolish for being kind, or naive for trusting people, or weak for choosing honesty over strategy. Maybe you've been told that you're too soft, too forgiving, too easy to take advantage of. But think about this. If the only reason you act kindly is to get something back, then you're not really free. You're still playing the same game as everyone else. But if you can choose kindness, honesty, and compassion, even when there's nothing in it for you, then you are truly free. In a world obsessed with winning, that kind of freedom is priceless.
Dostoyevsky doesn't pretend that this path is easy. He shows us, through Prince Myshkin, how painful it can be. But he also shows us its incredible beauty. Myshkin may be broken by the end, but he is never corrupted. He never becomes bitter, never turns to hatred. That is a victory, even if the world can't see it. So maybe that's the ultimate lesson. Goodness, in its truest form, exists outside of the world's rewards and punishments. It is its own reward. It is its own power. It changes people quietly, deeply, in ways they might not even understand. And if you choose to live that way, yes, you might suffer, but you will never be fake. You will never have to hide who you really are. And that authenticity, that unwavering light, is something no one can ever take away from you.
So the next time you find yourself wondering whether it's worth it to be good, remember Prince Myshkin. Remember that his story is not just a tragedy. It's a radical challenge. It asks you, do you want to wear a mask like everyone else? Or do you want to live honestly, even if it hurts? There is no easy answer. There is no perfect path. But Dostoyevsky shows us that there is a choice. And maybe, just maybe, the truest power of goodness is that it gives you the courage to make that choice and to stand by it, no matter what. In the end, whether you're remembered as a fool or a saint, whether you succeed or fail, what will matter most is whether you stayed true to the light inside you. Because in a world full of masks, to live without one, to live honestly, with kindness, with compassion, might just be the most powerful act of all. Thanks for watching. If this left you thinking, share your thoughts below. And remember to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss the next deep dive. See you soon.